Hi guys, the aim for today's presentation is to make you, the watchkeeper, aware of the different types of alarms that you could expect to find on board your vessel and the proper response that would be required of you. In this regard, IMO has developed a comprehensive code on the alarms and indicators. It's called the IMO Code on Alarms and Indicators. Uh, this was adopted on the 23rd of November 1995. The code is recommended to be used as an international safety standard for designing alarms and indicators for the ship's equipment, and machinery. So the keywords that you have to take note of in the IMO code on alarm indicators are that it provides a general design guidance to promote uniformity of type, location, and priority. So that means that irrespective of what kind of ship you are sailing on, different companies, different ships, there should be some kind of uniformity so that the officer or the ship's officer or the ship's crew, when they go on different ships, they should not be confused about the alarm signs and the symbols of the alarm. There should be some kind of uniformity. Alright, so that was the aim of the IMO code on alarm indicators. The code on alarms and indicators applies to all the shipboard alarms and indicators for ships constructed on or after the 1st of April 1994. For existing ships, if there are any ships left now, which are constructed before 1994, the code applies if major modifications to or new installations of alarms and indicators were carried out after 1st April 1994. Otherwise, ships constructed before 1994 can proceed with whatever system they had on board, which may not comply with IMO code. All right. So with the navigation bridge alarm systems, you have to be very aware of the different alarms that are there and understand the proper responses. Because when you're on the ship's bridge or you're in the ship's engine room, different alarms ring all the time. So you have to be very aware of which alarm is ringing and what kind of response you're required to provide to that alarm. So you should not get confused. All right. So let's start with the different types of alarms and the alarm system types that you have. You have the emergency alarms, you have the primary alarms, and you have the secondary alarms. So I'll talk about each of these alarms and I'll give you examples of each of these alarms. The first one is emergency alarms. These alarms indicate that there is immediate danger to human life or to the ship's safety or machinery, and immediate danger exists and it demands that immediate action to be taken. All right. So the type of alarms that fall under this category, there is a general alarm, which may be operated by a push button or a turn switch on the bridge or from remote locations. It is an alarm summoning passengers and crew to muster stations. Normally the two standard signals are, the first one is 7 short followed by a 1 long blast, which means emergency stations. And sometimes on many ships there are short, long, repeated 3 times, which is alpha, 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 which means abandon ship. Now you have to note that the emergency stations could mean any of the following. It could mean fire, man overboard, imminent collision, imminent grounding, or any other sort of emergency except for abandoned ship. Alright, so spelling of imminent is not correct here. It should be IMMINENT. Alright. So due to the high risk of fire, the general alarm may be activated by a fire specific alarm, and then you can activate it through the manual fire alarm points. Now these may be of the button break glass types or turnkey types, and are distributed throughout the accommodation. The manual ones activate a bell or a klaxon on the bridge and in accommodation, and some method of testing them is provided. The automatic fire alarms could be bimetallic strips or expansion bubble devices which actuate alarms and possibly an extinguishing system. That extinguishing system could be a water-based drenching system, and they are usually selectively tested at a survey. Alright, then you have the general alarms or fire alarms, and you have them for the automated alarm for the release of fixed firefighting medium, CO2, especially when being released into the engine room. And the thing that you have to remember here, when you release CO2, it requires all compartments to be sealed tight. There should not be any scope for any kind of leak in that compartment. So that's why it's very important that before you release the CO2, you should sound an alarm, and that alarm should sound, which indicates that if there are any personnel in that compartment, they should vacate those premises, because CO2 can suffocate a person to death. So once the CO2 is released, if all the compartments are sealed tight, a person may be suffocated to death. So that's why an alarm is required. These alarms are normally supplemented by um, a light signal, a revolving strobe light, and it's quite alarm. It's quite loud. I'm sorry, it's quite loud. And in the engine room, when people are working, they should be able to hear and even see sometimes the strobe light flashing, which indicates to them that they should be vacating those premises immediately. All right, the general alarms, like I told you before, it can be an alpha signal by the Morse code, which is one short, one long, followed by one short, one long, and then one short and one long again. And normally the abandon ship signal is given by a verbal command by the master. So only when the so remember, there's two things here. So one alarm, general alarm, may summon you to the lifeboats. That doesn't mean you have to abandon the ship. The abandoned ship is confirmed only by the master verbally over the public address system or loudspeakers. All right, so don't get confused between the two. Then you have the primary alarms. These alarms or this category includes the alarms which indicate a condition that requires prompt attention to prevent an emergency condition from developing. As is evident, quite a few operations may be categorized under this category. So some of the more common types of alarm under this include, firstly, the bridge navigation watch alarm. Now, this bridge navigation watch alarm, in many ships it's also called the dead man's alarm. This alarm is there on the ship so that the watchkeeper should not go off to sleep. Sometimes the watchkeeper on the bridge or the engine room is tired and they might doze off. So this is an alarm that needs to be reset every now and then by the ship's officer to make sure that he's not sleeping. If the officer forgets to reset this alarm, a signal goes into the master's cabin or to the chief engineer's room to indicate that the watchkeeper might be incapacitated or sleeping. So this is just to keep the watchkeeper alert on the ship's bridge. All right, then you have the bridge navigation watch alarm system. And the reason there is so much text here is that's because the the IMO SOLAS, or Safety of Life at Sea, which is like the religious book of the maritime industry, they make it mandatory to have this alarm fitted to all passengers and cargo vessels that were adopted by the IMO on 5th of June. So this resolution was adopted by the IMO on 5th of June, and you can see there are many conditions here, and that's why I had to put it on text. And it looks a bit cluttered. It looks a bit busy here. So if the cargo ships of 150 gross tonnage and upwards and passenger ships, irrespective of size, constructed on or after 1st July 2011, should have this alarm. And there are other conditions that you can read here. I don't want to take you through all that. If I read the slides, it will become very boring for you. So the bridge navigation watch alarm system should be in operation whenever the ship is underway at sea. So that's basically the requirement. And the following is only a guide, and if you are at all unsure, then you should check with your relevant class, society, or flag authority. So there are certain guides that are provided for the BNWS, that the system should have 3 modes of operation: automatic system, which comes into operation when ships are heading or track control system is activated. The manual system should be on and manual off systems, so on and so forth. So the alarm system should have a configurable dormant period of 3 to 12 minutes. The reset cancellation can only be located on the bridge. So there are many other conditions that you need to fulfill. This is just a guidance, but of course your class, the class under which the ship is registered, can dictate the requirements here. All right. And then under primary alarms, you also have the machinery alarms, which are like the engine room alarms. So this basically deals with the engine room related alarms. Then you have the steering gear alarms. So any failure with any equipment in the steering gear equipment will indicate a malfunction or abnormal condition, such as overload of the engines or overload of the system, sorry, steering system, or hydraulic oil tank low level, something like that. All right, power failure alarm, off course alarm. So these are those alarms. So these are there in the steering gear room as well as in the ship's bridge as well. Then you have something called the UMS alarm. If you don't know what UMS is, UMS stands for Unmanned Missionary Spaces. These are those ships where the engine rooms are not manned by personnel during certain hours. So especially this is after in the evening or throughout the night. These ships do not have to be manned by any personnel. The bridge always there has to be somebody on the bridge, but engine room spaces can be designed to not be manned. And then you have alarm systems placed in on such ships so that if there is any kind of malfunction, that is indicated to the officer on duty or the chief engineer as well. So if a ship is to be operated under unmanned machinery spaces or UMS conditions, a comprehensive alarm system has to be installed with the following principal requirements. Machinery faults must be indicated at a main control station. Engineering personnel must be made aware that such a fault has occurred. If the ship is operating with UMS, the bridge watchkeeper must be made aware so that a fault has occurred or that the engine room staff are aware of the fault and are attending to it, and that the fault has been rectified. So these things should be notified to the bridge officer as well. And the bridge watchkeeper must be well aware of the immediate steps to be taken to safeguard the safety of the person in the engine room, since normally the engine room person will be unaccompanied. And finally, an effective system must be provided to enable the engineer answering the alarm to ask for assistance from other engineers. All right. Then you can have the control system fault alarm, and this indicates a failure of an automatic or a remote control system such as a navigating bridge, or it could be a propulsion control failure. Then you have the bilge alarms. The bilge alarms indicates an abnormally high level of bilge water. Some of the newer bulk carriers are now to be fitted with the water ingress detection systems, also called as WIDS, with suitable alarms. Even in the cargo holds, which are carrying dry cargo or even container ships, these alarms may be fitted in the bilges. So in case the rainwater has ingressed or there is some kind of a hole in the ship's hull because of which flooding might be taking place, or there are cargo leaks and the bilge is getting filled, this alarm is triggered. All right, then you have the fire detection alarm. Now this alerts the crew on the bridge and other places that a fire has been detected. This is the alarm sounded by the fire detection system, which on some vessels automatically raises the general fire alarm. So uh, then you have fault alarms. These fault alarms indicates faults in emergency or primary alarm or detection systems or failure of their power supplies. So it could be a system on the ship, and any alarm or any failure in that system detects these alarms. Then you have cargo alarms. Sometimes some cargoes, specific cargoes, may require this alarm to be fitted. This indicates abnormal conditions originating in cargo or in systems for the preservation of the safety of cargo. So I can give you an example here. Say, for example, reefer ships carrying refrigerated cargo, and those cargoes need to be carried at a specific temperature. Or if you're carrying coal, even coal at a very high temperature can sometimes be flammable. So these kind of cargoes which require special conditions for carriage, these alarms are fitted on those ships, which indicates that the conditions may not be suitable for the carriage, and then the ship staff can take suitable action towards it. So here, some examples are given here, such as high temperature of coal, loss of refrigeration in reefer cargo, excessive humidity in raw timber, and high-level alarms for liquid cargoes, gas leaks in oil tankers. So these are different examples of cargo alarms. Then you have the gas detection alarm that indicates that a gas is dangerous. A gas which is dangerous has been detected on a ship. So, for example, oxygen level or low oxygen levels, or high levels of dangerous gases or explosive gases, or if a space has been enclosed for a long time and somebody is trying to enter that space, that may not be suitable because of low oxygen. So these are the different alarms. Then sometimes if you have power operated watertight or weathertight doors, then you may have alarms for those as well. So you can see here on the chart that the location of those alarms and the location of the doors are marked on charts, so that when an alarm is sounded or when an alarm is ringing, you can specifically find out which of the watertight doors or the weathertight doors have failed here, which are operated and backed by the power. Sometimes it indicates low level in hydraulic fluid reservoirs, loss of electrical power supply, etc. Finally, you have the last category of secondary alarms. Now, this is the category to cover all the other alarms on the bridge, which are not classified as emergency or primary. The common examples sometimes, or round examples, include GPS cross-track errors. The cross-track errors is when the ship has, the vessel has gone off the course more than it should. Then you have HTOP alarms in the GPS. This stands for horizontal dilution of precision, which indicates that the position obtained through the GPS may not be very accurate. Then you may have the autopilot limit alarms that indicates that the autopilot is not steering correctly. The ship may be going off course. You may have gyro compass power failure alarms, navigation light failure alarms. So although they are called secondary alarms, they need to be attended to immediately. They are not directly as threatening as the primary or emergency alarms. They need to be tended to immediately. So don't think they don't need to be tended to. This also indicates some kind of an emergency on the ship, but of course it's not life threatening. It may lead into a life threatening situation. So general requirements for these alarms is that they should be both audible and visual. The emergency alarms should be very audible, and that's what I've told you before, like situations like where CO2 flooding is taking place or fires have broken out. Alarms should be so much audible that passengers or seafarers or ship staff should be able to hear it and be aware of the fact that there is some kind of emergency on the ship. Alright, this particular is very important for passenger ships because passengers are not normally used to dealing with emergencies. They are not trained to respond to emergencies. Alright, then if you have alarm panels, like if you have the fire control alarm panel or you have the watertight door alarm panel, they must display the following conditions. Normal condition when everything is fine, the alarm condition which normally is indicated by a red light, and the accepted or the reset condition when the alarm has been accepted condition basically indicates that you have noted the alarm and you may be working on it, or it's not it might be a faulty alarm, then you reset the alarm. All right, so one thing you have to remember, even if there is a faulty alarm, you should make sure that you should go and check it. I'll give you an example here that many times container ships they suffer through vibrations because of the hatch cover being lifted or put back. Because of these vibrations also, these alarms, because they are so sensitive, they start to ring in cargo holds. So many times the false alarms will happen on your ship, but that doesn't mean you should just assume that they are false. You must always make sure that you send two people in, because then the safety is assured. If one person goes in and maybe there's a gas leak or something and this guy faints, that's not safety. So always make sure two people go in and check the alarms. Visual alarm indicators should always remain on until the fault is corrected. And once the fault is corrected, the panel should automatically reset to the normal condition. Manual resetting should also be provided. Automated changeover to backup power should be there because these alarm systems indicate threat to life, and anything that indicates threat to life and safety on the ship needs to be backed up by the emergency generator. So if there is any power failure, they should be backed up by the emergency generator. There should be a capability to test alarm panels. So normally on the ship, it's the electrician or somebody, there's a designated officer whose job is to make sure these alarms are tested. They are tested weekly, sometimes monthly, sometimes bi-weekly, and there is a schedule there. So make sure these alarms are tested, and there should be a capability to test these alarms. Alarms should not be cancelled from remote positions. It should only be cancelled at the main panel. So when we say remote positions, for example, if you have fire alarms which are located throughout the accommodation, and if somebody rings that fire alarm, you should not be able to reset it from that remote location in an alleyway or of the accommodation. You should only be able to reset it from the bridge, which kind of indicates that the ship's officer or responsible officer has observed this alarm, noted this alarm, and suitable action is going to be taking place. For fire extinguishing mediums such as CO2, their alarms should be audibly different from other alarms. And I've told you the reason already a couple of times. That's because when a person should hear this alarm, they should know that CO2 is being released into this compartment and they need to vacate it, because if the compartment is sealed shut and CO2 gas is being released, it's going to suffocate them to death. Alright, finally, alarms need to be clearly labeled, and the use of international symbols is important. So remember that IMO provides you with internationally recognized symbols, and you have to order these IMO stickers, because many a times on the ship, if these alarms are not labeled by the stickers, now these stickers are luminous, so that means even if there is a power failure, it illuminates itself. It's a self-illuminating sticker. So even at night, you should be able to see these stickers and the location of the alarms or the location of the stairway. So these stickers are internationally renowned, and your company needs to order it. So you need to order it as a ship's officer, and the company needs to supply it. And all these alarms should be labeled by the IMO sticker. So in many ports, if the port state officer or the flag state officer comes on board your ship and don't find these alarms to be labeled, many a times what they do is they can fine the ship. All right. Now, what happens when the alarm is ringing? Remember that you must be able to immediately respond correctly if the alarm is activated. Even if the alarm is false, make sure you check it out. All right. So, my presentation has got stuck here for some reason. So, I'll go into the next presentation from. Sorry about that. All right. So, this basically shows you what to do if alarm is there. So make sure you can either silence the alarm, then you should identify the reason of the alarm, make sure that it's valid. That means really there is an emergency. If it's not an emergency, then of course it's a false alarm. Now I had made this presentation with the alarm ringing, and that's why I had to shut it off, and that's why the break in the presentation. So sorry about that. All right. Then if it's a false alarm, then make sure you reset the alarm and monitor it so that you make sure that it was always a false alarm. But in any case, inform the master or the senior officer in charge of the vessel. If the alarm is true, if there is really an emergency, make sure you assign the responsibility to either yourself to take action or to the other officer and they should inform that the action has been taken, and then make sure a responsible officer is monitoring it, and in any case the master of the ship or the senior officer in charge should be informed. All right, so this becomes very important that the master needs to be informed. These steps should be built into a routine which will cause you to act automatically to counter the non-normal condition. If such routines are not laid down for your ship, try thinking of in advance what you should do when an alarm situation arises. All right. Finally, the alarm indicators as per SOLAS chapter 5, every vessel more than 500 gross tonnage should be fitted with the following indicators. All right, so we are not talking about alarm indicators now, we're talking about indicators only. So for the rudder angle indicator should be provided on the bridge as well as the engine room. And for the propeller, you should have the thrust or the force propeller, especially for CPP or control pitch propellers, you should have the thrust indicator, the direction and the angle indicators. You should have the pitch indicator and the revolution indicator provided to you on the bridge as well as the ship's engine room. Alright, so this was a quick, not a quick lecture, but this lecture pretty much covered the alarms and the indicators. If you think I didn't cover something, please let me know. If you didn't understand some portion, please write to me in the comment section. And thank you everybody for watching. I'll see you soon with my next video. Bye.